Before viewing video lessons, it is important to read the textbook using the learning guide as your turn-by-turn directions. Then use the learning guide to take organized notes in your own words with examples and pictures. Variations in consciousness. In this video, we will finish talking about the sleep-wake cycle, and we'll discuss the world of dreams and practical questions about sleep and dreaming. We're going to start by finishing the sleep-wake cycle by looking at some sleep problems. The most common sleep problem is insomnia. This can involve difficulty falling asleep or difficulty staying asleep. About a third of adults report symptoms of insomnia. Narcolepsy is also a sleep disorder. It is commonly misportrayed in the media, but it essentially involves a sudden onset of a sleep-like state. With narcolepsy, someone can be completely awake and alert one moment and then appear to enter a sleep-like state the moment later. This particular sleep disorder has been linked to a biological problem called hypocreatine deficiency. With sleep apnea, essentially what happens during the night is a person stops breathing or has their airway restricted, and that results in sort of a gasping for air that wakes the person up. Sometimes this is due to the relaxation of the canal that maintains your airway when you're asleep. This is oftentimes related to excessive tissue, such as for somebody who's overweight. You can also have a problem with the nervous system where the nervous system fails to keep the person breathing. In either case, when the brain registers that not enough air is getting through, they will take the person out of the deep stage of sleep and wake them up. And sometimes people aren't even aware that this is happening. Unfortunately, this particular sleep disorder can be quite deadly. One of the more common populations are middle-aged men who are overweight. And so at least once a year I catch a story about an ex-professional football player, and they oftentimes put on weight after they retire, who dies in their sleep, and sleep apnea is the most common cause for that. Another type of sleeping problem is sleepwalking, and the reason why I like to talk about this here is because there's a lot of myths associated with sleepwalking. First of all, it's much more common in children than in adults. Only about 3% of adults experience sleepwalking episodes. But the most dangerous thing about sleepwalking is that someone is going to hurt themselves in the night, fall down a set of steps, or run into something, trip over something. It is a myth that waking up somebody who's sleepwalking will make them go crazy. However, they may be a little bit ticked off with you because they don't recognize that they're awake. So if I'm deeply asleep in my bed in the middle of the night and you come wake me up, I'm probably going to be a little grouchy. And so I think that's probably where that myth came from. So I want to talk a little bit about how we can deal with sleeping problems. And so when people aren't getting a good night's sleep, particularly if they're having trouble falling asleep, sometimes they can do things that actually make the problem worse. For example, with insomnia, if you have trouble getting to sleep, you might take an over-the-counter sleeping pill. The problem with most sleeping pills is they contain sedatives. Sedatives are drugs that you can become dependent on. What that means is that you need more and more of that particular medication in order to get any sort of effect. And so what happens is people start out taking a couple of sleeping pills, they start to feel dependent on them, they start using them on a regular basis, They develop a tolerance, so now I have to take 2 pills instead of 1 pill, and then I end up taking higher and higher doses. Now I have an addiction to the drug, and what happens when I stop taking it is that my insomnia comes back, only worse. So if pills aren't the right way to deal with sleep problems, we need to take a look at what is. And what we essentially find is that having good sleep habits, sometimes this is called good sleep hygiene, is the best way to avoid a sleep problem in the first place or fix one if you develop one. Now, how we do this is we have to basically consider that circadian clock. Remember the circadian rhythm we talked about. The best way to set that clock so that it helps us with our sleep is to have and stick to a regular bedtime and wake up schedule. You should only go to bed when you're sleepy and in that alpha relaxed brainwave state. So the best way to do that is to establish a relaxing before bed routine. This is especially true for children. Make sure when you get to your bedroom that it's a dark, quiet, cool room. If you lay down to go to sleep and you're not sleeping in 15 minutes, you need to get up out of bed, go do something relaxing to put yourself into alpha, and then come back and lay down. Laying in bed and trying to force yourself to go to sleep makes the problem worse. So that's all about your regular bedtime. Now let's talk about your regular wake time. When you wake up in the morning, you need to really and truly wake up. So there are 4 keys to really waking up in the morning. Let's say your alarm normally goes off at 6. First thing is absolutely positively no snoozing. Every time you press snooze on the alarm clock, you're robbing yourself of good quality sleep and you're confusing your circadian rhythm. So once the alarm goes off at 6, you need to hop up out of bed and turn on the lights, and if the sun is up, ideally open the blinds and expose yourself to natural sunlight. Remember, light is key in setting your circadian rhythm. You need to engage in some minimal physical activity. Now, you could go and do a full exercise routine or workout, but even just running down the steps and back up would be enough to let your body know that you're truly awake. And then the last way to really set this clock is to eat something. We call breakfast breakfast for a reason. It's the meal that breaks the fast of the night. When we're not eating, our body thinks we're sleeping. So when you wake up in the morning and skip breakfast, your body's a little bit confused about whether or not you're truly awake. So to have your best possible circadian rhythm, you need light, activity, food, and no snoozing. A couple of other things that help in avoiding or solving sleep problems is to exercise regularly, but not right before bed. Right before bed makes it harder for you to fall asleep. You also need to avoid napping unless you know how to do it right, which means taking the nap on a regular basis at the same time every day, usually in the afternoon for 20 minutes. You should also avoid products that can interfere with your sleep. So stimulants like caffeine and nicotine. The general rule of thumb is not to have any stimulants after lunch. So if you have coffee or soda with lunch, that's sort of your limit. You should be cut off at that point. Another recommendation is to avoid excessive alcohol and over-the-counter sleep aids. Alcohol does not help you fall asleep. It helps you enter a sleep-like state, but not restful, restorative sleep. And we've already talked about the problems with the over-the-counter sleep aids. Our last topic in this video has to do with dreams. Dreams are simply mental experiences you have during sleep usually during REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. What we find is that there are common themes to dreams. So when we do research, we see that being chased is one of the most common themes. Dreams that involve sex is second most common. The fourth most common probably you have as college students, dreams about school, teachers, or studying. And you can kind of look at this list that's also in the textbook, and you can see that there's some pretty common themes to our dreams. Another thing about our dreams is that the content in them is usually familiar. It usually reflects experiences that you've had in the last 24 to 48 hours. We call this waking life spillover or day residue. Now we have different ideas about what dreams mean, and some non-Western cultures have the interpretation of dreams that they mean something supernatural. So for example, if you have a dream that you found money, they may say that you're going to find money or you're going to get some money in your real life. There is absolutely no evidence that dreams are supernatural. So in terms of Western views of dreaming, there are three main theories. One is Freud's theory of dreams as wish fulfillment. Freud said that we dream about the things that we wish we could do or wish we could have. But he said that because these reflect unconscious desires, the actual content of the dream will be masked. And so you may have heard the saying that a cigar is just a cigar. Well, that's because Freud would say if you had a dream about a cigar, the cigar was a phallic symbol or a symbol for sex. The second major theory about what dreaming means is the problem-solving view that comes to us from Cartwright. And this is essentially the idea that when you go to sleep, you can think through and solve problems in your sleep. And you may even had this experience where you're kind of struggling with a problem and you sleep, and then the next morning you're able to see it in a new light and solve that particular problem. We do see some evidence of this particular theory. The last theory of dreaming is the one that has the most research support, and this is the activation synthesis model by Hobson. And when we look at the parts of the brain and the patterns of activity when people are dreaming, what we see is they resemble the same parts of the brain and patterns of activity that were present in that person's waking life in that last day. And so what we think dreams may be is sort of the semi-conscious aware part of our brain trying to make sense of these odd and strange signals. So I may have a dream that my house burns and Scooby-Doo and the gang come and help me put out the fire, and we discover that it was really old Mr. Wilson that set the fire. And you may say to me, how in the world does that have anything to do with your last day? Well, what you may not know is that I saw a TV commercial for a alarm company that was talking about fire that particular day. And I was reminded of watching Scooby-Doo when I was a kid that same day. And so when those neural pathways and those memories start to fire, the semi-conscious part of my brain tries to weave those together to make some sort of sense.